Am I going, or I think I'm waiting for someone to tell me what to do. Okay, you're good. Right, okay.
Go.
Okay, good morning. 50 and Coping is all about finding the truth behind the kind of darker issues in life and things that make you struggle and finding a way to cope. And today we are privileged to have, on my left, Chris Sibley. Morning, Chris.
Hi, Jim. You all right?
Lee's here too, of course.
Hiya.
Chris, this is a delicate subject, but I think one that we should take head on.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are one of 3 founders of the OLLIE Foundation,
Yep.
which is a charity to help. Well, you tell me.
Okay. So the OLLIE Foundation, do you want to know how it started? I can give you a bit of background to how it started.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Just say what it does now.
Okay.
And then we'll regress through for the whole story.
Okay, yeah, fine. So OLLIE, which stands for One Life Lost Is Enough, is a charity that delivers mental health, well-being, suicide intervention and prevention training.
Right.
Now, we can deliver that online, so there's multiple online courses which people can access, but we also go into schools and talk about nurturing. We might work with the police, the NHS, so it's anybody who might come into contact with people who could be struggling or might be struggling,
Right.
or they could be struggling themselves. So it's a real wide range of different courses and events.
So, in a basis of education.
Yes.
So you're trying to, make everyone aware of what the triggers are, what the signs are.
But some of it is about, I use this term about being oblivious, and we can come on to that later, but I was oblivious, and I've learned a lot of stuff since my son died that if I'd have known, it might have made a difference. Right. So it's to try and make people aware of things that could be signs, although often there aren't any.
Yeah.
But it's also about how you can actually tangibly help somebody if they're struggling and put a safe plan in place which helps keep them safe when they have times that are tough.
Yeah. I mean, I'm blown away by your charity, right? And I'm not saying that because you're sat down the left of me. Debbie, your CEO, right? I was talking to Debbie on the email, and I said, "Oh, we were thinking maybe we should do the show at your offices." Yeah. And she went, "Well, that's good, but we don't have any offices."
No, we don't.
And she said, "If I need an office, my accountant lends me an office."
Yeah.
And I'm like, right. So my biggest bugbear, in a very arrogant way, I know it's about me, but when a charity has a big building with their big name across it, someone's got to pay for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that stops the money going. But your money, the people who give you funds, know that it's going to your work.
It goes directly back into the training to the extent the office is a classic example, because you're right, the cost of offices.
Yeah.
We don't have business cards. You get them on your phone. Why pay to have business cards printed? Because if you donate me £10 to go towards somebody's training, we're not going to spend it on business cards.
No.
So absolutely, every penny is crucial, and be careful with it.
Okay, I think it's time to regress back to the beginning of all of this.
Yeah.
Now, all I know is your son sadly took his own life, age 16.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to.
Well, I hope so. Can we? Let's go back. You tell me your story with that.
Okay. So I've got 3 children, and TJ was the eldest, and he was 16, and he just left school. So he used to live out of county with his mum, but I saw them every weekend, every holiday, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Now, because he was my firstborn son, we're a bit like 2 peas in a pod. Very similar, likes, love music. So we had this thing about music, and we had this saying we always used to say was, "It's all about the lyrics." If we liked a song, we'd say, "Really listen to the lyrics," and say, "It's all about the lyrics." So he was always round mine every weekend and everything else. And then the actual event started in 2014, so pivotal moments, as somebody referred to it to me once. I'm lying in bed really early hours of the morning, like half past midnight kind of thing. Bearing on, my son lived out of county. There's a knock on the door, and you think, well, it could be mates at 12:30, could be, maybe. Looked out my bedroom window and you see 3 coppers standing on your doorsteps. You know it's not good.
Yeah, this is not.
This isn't going to be a good news story. But for some reason, my mind made me think they're coming to tell me something about my mum. That why I thought that, I've no idea.
Okay.
By the time I got to the front door, my brain had thought, well, they wouldn't be coming to tell me anything about my mum. So strange stuff happens. I opened the door. The first copper, I actually knew him from the gym that I went to, so that was weird.
Right.
They kind of back you up into the front room. You sit down, sitting there in bloody fluffy dressing gown or whatever.
Right.
And sounds ridiculous, this. It was a bit like a movie. You know when you see the things where people get tunnel vision?
Yeah.
All I could see was the guy I knew The other two coppers, I couldn't tell you anything about them, but they were standing right next to him. So I'd kind of tunnelled in on this guy.
Yeah.
And he said, hello, Chris, can you sit down a minute? I said, yeah. He said, I've got some news for you. And they don't tell you your son's died. They say there's been an incident involving your son. So I'm sitting there and I literally like this, and I said, yeah. And he said, I'm afraid to tell you that he's died and his body's been taken to a hospital. Now, this always sounds weird when I tell people. It sounds weird to me. You'd expect that I'd then have a meltdown and lose my crap, right? But I didn't. I was like this, and I went, okay. And then he said, okay, what are you going to do then? I said, well, where is he? And he told me the hospital that his body had been taken to. And I said, well, I'm going to get dressed. And he said, I'm going to have some porridge, because that was my thing. And then I'm going to get in the car and drive there.
Right.
So he said, we'll stay with you for a bit. I said, no, you don't have to. He said, no, we will. And again, this all sounds ridiculous when I replay it back. He said, have you got any drink in the house? And I went, no, why do you want one? And and I think, what? And he said to me, no, quite often we give people news like this and the first thing they do is go and grab a bottle. And I said, I don't actually have any drink in the house. I said, but I wouldn't do that anyway, because I've got somewhere I need to be now.
Yeah.
Right. So he said, we're going to wait for a bit. I said, look, you don't have to. So they literally sat in the front room while I went and made my porridge, ate my porridge, went and got dressed, all of this in like 10 minutes. And I said, well, I'm going now. So they were like, okay. And off they went. Yeah. I jumped in the car, so obviously early hours of the morning, knowing where I've got to drive to, got to the hospital. And I thought, it's freaking, I'm hours early. Nothing's open. A&E's open, but hospital's shut. So sat in the car and thought, I've just got to wait. Distracting myself weirdly, playing bloody some game on my phone. Just trying to occupy my mind while I'm sitting there. Still just like, right, got to do this. My head was in this. It's like the brain shuts off the distressing part so you can function and do your stuff. And after sitting in the car for a bit, it was quite chilly. I thought I'll go and sit in A&E. And again, another pivotal moment, as it turned out. So I'm sitting in A&E, and I don't know if you call them sisters or matrons, but whatever she was, the nurse running it, she came and sat next to me, asked me what I was there for, and I told her. I said, my son's in the mortuary. And she sat there just chatting. She said, I know exactly what you're going through. And I wasn't being funny. I said, to be honest, you got no idea what I'm going through. She said, no, I have. She said, I absolutely do know what you're going through. And she sat with me for a bit. Before she went back to work, she gave me this card, right? She pulled this card out of her pocket, stuck it in my hand and said, you might find that useful further down the track. I just stuck it in my pocket and sat there. So then I waited till the mortuary opened. Mortuary assistant, again, it's not a criticism, they do what they do, gave me the obligatory, sorry for your loss. And the way my head was working, not in an aggressive way or anything, I went, but you don't know me. And you don't know my son, it's just something you say. And he was obviously a little bit taken aback. And he said, do you want to see your son? Now, because of where my son died, I knew I wouldn't be able to. So I was really surprised when he asked me this, right? And he said, yeah, do you want to see him? And I said, I didn't think I could. He said, well, if you do, we need to do a bit of reconstruction.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I remember standing there thinking, you're talking about my son like he's made out of Lego bricks or something. Right? And I said, well, no, okay, that's up, it is what it is. So then that was that was the hospital bit. So I never actually got to see him, couldn't go and see him. So I then went off. By this time they'd been in touch with the transport police and all of this, and the transport police then get involved, want to interview you, and they're doing rounds of interviewing all his friends. But
can I ask, why the transport police?
Because he died on the railway.
Okay.
So it instantly goes to the transport police.
Yep.
And you end up then, to be honest, I didn't expect it at all, spending the day driving up and down between family and the police station, and then back to family, and then the police want you to go down again and talk about something else. So I spent the whole day literally driving around, which is weird when I think back.
Yeah.
Now it's probably different now, because this was 2014, so things were a bit different.
Yep.
And so that was that day, and a lot of the rest of it I couldn't really tell you what happened the rest of the day. I ended up staying locally with some friends near the hospital that I knew and stuff, so I didn't have to keep driving up and down to where I lived. So that was kind of like day one. But at that point there'd still been, for me physically, no breakdown, no outward signs of any emotional thing. My brain was very much in, just got to do stuff.
There's a lot of instances in life where you find yourself with information overload. Also, your brain knows that at no point in that first situation can you deal with that.
Yeah.
So it focuses. Like, you said about tunnel vision.
Yeah.
You knew that policeman.
Yeah.
So therefore the others didn't matter. They didn't exist.
Yeah.
So we've got past the first day. How do you cope? What happened the next day when you got up? Has your life changed? Do you feel, this is the thing, you go on as normal, right?
Yeah, you carry on as normal. Smoke one cigarette after another. Yeah. So just literally smoking my nuts off with the cigarettes. But there was a lot of family around, extended family, friends and stuff. And it's almost like a family huddle, sharing stories kind of thing. And I was a bit on the periphery because the police were still around, as they would be, coming to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest, the inspector for the transport police, who's retired now, in all of it, was fantastic.
Oh, amazing.
Now, because I'm guessing he's seen that a lot. That's his job, right? So he's seen it a lot. And there wasn't really any after support. So even in the days and weeks that followed, as somebody who loses someone to suicide, there was no all of these services click in and start helping you. My support was a hug from the inspector of the transport police.
Whoa.
That was it.
Okay.
That was it. So I kind of always remember him, and he retired not long afterwards, because he got to that point. So for me, the way my head worked, I had to find out information as if that would change something.
Okay.
Right? One more bit of information. What happened here? What happened there? And so I went on a proper mission trying to find out as much as I possibly could, but at the same time turning into Dr. Google, looking at suicide and the horrific numbers, which I was completely oblivious to before my son died.
Yeah.
But it was literally as if I can find an answer to this question, that'd change something. But obviously the only thing that I really wanted to change was bring my son back, and nothing I found out was going to do that.
No.
But it's how my head works.
The search for information is a distraction, but it's also something that means you can be involved with the situation your son found himself.
Yeah.
Do you know what caused him to take his own life?
No, there was no note. So which is quite common.
Yeah.
People don't leave a note. There was some bullying at school, it turned out, but he had lots of friends at school as well. In fact, on his last day at school, he stood up and gave a speech in front of the whole school about how fantastic school was and stuff.
Right.
Now, the bit I said about being oblivious, I was oblivious to the state of suicide in the UK, how many people take their own lives.
Yeah.
But I was oblivious to things that might have been indicators there was a problem.
Okay.
Right? To me, they were just teenage boy stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So, but with what I've learned since, they're things that might not be a sign, but they could lead you to have a conversation and ask a direct question.
Yeah.
Right. So, which I didn't know any of that beforehand. So there were a couple of things he said, and that bit I said earlier about it's all about the lyrics.
Yeah.
Not long before he died, we're listening to a song around a table, and he'd play me tunes and say, do you like it, and vice versa. And we always said it's all about the lyrics, really specifically. And he played me this song. And he looked at me when it finished straight in the eye and said, "Dad, it's all in the words, Dad."
Right.
Now, at the time, I just thought, well, that's a variation of what we always said. Didn't even register that he'd used a different turn of phrase.
Yeah.
Until after he died. And then I listened to that, I remembered it, listened to the song and thought, Christ, it was like he was talking to me. Was he? Wasn't he? I'll never know.
No. But as he drew attention to it, then that gives you a link.
Yeah.
When you're faced with this, is it helpful to have the family around, or do you find yourself dealing with their grief more than yours?
To be honest, I was so wrapped up in myself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because there was, and it was really weird, just the way my headspace was. Some of them, it was the weeping and wailing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, enough of the weeping and wailing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know, I felt as if it turned into it was all about them, but it's just their way of dealing with it. But,
no, it is, but also, at the end of the day, everyone's grief is personal to them and they'll show it in different ways. Yeah. And if you've got a situation where everyone around you is doing the weeping and wailing, that's going to bring you down. Yeah. But also, I mean, my only frame of reference was when my mother died. Yeah. We were in a room and everyone, like these people I barely knew, were all weeping and wailing about her dying, and I'm like, well, hold on a minute, I'm stood here and I'm her son, who are you? Yeah. And it forms a bit of resentment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably just me, mind you, but I mean, but okay, so the police why are the police still, after the initial fact, they know what's happened?
Yeah.
Why do they need to talk to you all the time?
What they wanted to do is work out my son's movements on his last day.
Okay.
Kind of hour by hour. They want to fill in the blanks. So from when he left home, what did he then do? Because nobody really knew. They knew where he started and they knew where he'd finished, but they didn't know the bit in between.
Right.
And they managed to fill in every gap. Now, my son was somebody who came out afterwards that all of his school friends said he was the one who was always there for his friends when they were in trouble. So they'd go to him if they were feeling low and stuff. So what he did on his last day was individually go and visit members of the family, walking around the town. It was a summer's day, visiting friends. Stopped and sat to some homeless chap on a bench, and they shared earphones and listened to music and had a chat and shared a fag. So the police literally filled in every single hour virtually.
With the inference that was his journey to the end.
Yeah, to the end kind of thing.
Consciously doing that. Wow.
And it's strange how things happen, because the last thing he did, as he was at the station, he saw a girl leaving that he didn't know, but he knew her brother, right? And she had 2 crutches and a full leg cast. And he stopped to chat to her to check she was all right, because she was struggling to walk. He then walked her home, chatting to her, had a chat outside their house, made sure she got home safe, and then went back to the station. Wow. So that was the last person he spoke to. Now, I'm now friends with that family. I got to meet them afterwards. And really lovely people. Lovely people. So he filled up his time in his last day kind of saying hello and cheering up other people, and trying to help other people and stuff.
The thing with that as well is, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, he'd made a plan.
Yeah.
He'd found his piece, he'd made a plan, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
What is amazing is that the human ability to relate to other people's problems, even when you're in such a dark place.
Yeah.
But I mean, when we spoke to Joe, paddling paramedic, who he said after he'd made that plan and put all of his ducks in a row, he had a piece, and it made him happy almost. So that's amazing story to tell, and also shows them the measure of your son, and with all due respect to him, that's an amazing thing to do.
And it's as you said, Jim, everybody who saw him actually said to the police he was so happy. It was the happiest they'd seen him in ages. Exactly what you said about he knew what was going to happen, and so whatever was troubling him, it had gone, it had lifted. So they all said he was the happiest that they'd seen him in a long time. But
it lifted because he knew there was an end. And I think that's a pivotal point for him. Okay, so you're a little bit further down the line. And then how do you meet the others? How does this come into fruition?
Well, I flip you all the way back to the nurse who gave me the thing in the hospital. Right. So she gave me, unbeknown to me, a card which was for SOBS, which is a group for it's called Survivors of Bereavement Through Suicide. So that was the card she gave me when I sat in A&E.
Oh, amazing.
Okay, so I got it out, and it was literally, and I know the day because it was the same day as my son's inquest, because it was delayed a couple of times because they wanted to get more statements from friends and stuff. Okay. So it was 6 months, and it happened to be inquest. That night was the first SOBS group I was going to go to. So again, that was another good thing I was told. I spoke to the guy who ran SOBS beforehand, and this is an important note when you're talking about statistics of suicide, right? The guy said, don't be surprised if you don't get a suicide verdict. And I said, but why? It clearly was. And having seen the stuff I'd seen, it clearly was, and there was no dispute. Okay. He said, because quite often, even the most obvious suicides get misadventure, get a narrative, or accidental death. He said, so just don't be surprised if you don't get a suicide verdict. Now, to me, the verdict didn't matter, because the fact was my son was dead, so I couldn't care less what title they put on it.
What some judge says about it.
It made no difference. So I went to the inquest, accidental death, right? Because there was no note, and the coroner gave a couple of other reasons. They had to, at the point, the burden of proof was at the time the same as if you went to criminal court. So they had to be unequivocally sure. They've changed that slightly now, so there's a bit more leeway. So it was accidental death. So my son doesn't go towards the official figures, because the official figures are based on suicide verdicts at coroner's inquests. Right?
So the figures, like most governmental figures, are just that fit into little boxes.
They're well short of where it probably is.
And that's because of it at that point having to be seen as a criminal act. Is that what you're saying?
No. It was because the coroner had to be 100% sure he actually intended to take his own life.
Yeah.
If they couldn't be 100% sure, they wouldn't give a verdict to suicide. They might say it's accidental death, which is what they did in my son's case. And then they give some reasoning around why they've given an accidental death verdict.
Right.
And this isn't going into details, but to explain how crazy that is, 2 reasons with my son. There was no note, and because it was at a station, and this is real, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't be sure he hadn't just suddenly realised he was on the wrong platform and so crossed the tracks to get to the other platform. So they were the 2 reasons that he got accidental death. Now,
the trouble with the law is, though, everything is black and white. There is no grey, unless you can say that he took that step.
Exactly.
But still.
So it's a bit crazy. So I went to the inquest, and that was what it was. You know, like I said, it wasn't going to make any difference to me what it was. And that night I went to the subs group.
Right.
And I went there, it's only once a month, run by volunteers. And that was the first time since my son died, I was in a room full of people who got it.
Yep.
Everybody there had been impacted by suicide, and we weren't all on the same journey.
No.
But things they were saying, I'd think, yeah, that's me. That's what I've done. Because in that intervening 6 months, I had broken down, but not in front of other people particularly.
No.
But I'd had moments of intense anger on my own in the front room, where I'd be screaming at the top of my voice, just literally like I was going to burst blood vessels, you know. So I'd listen to these other people, and they'd be saying similar things, and I think, Christ, you know, it's not just me.
Do you know the more I hear about issues, not just suicide, but addiction, suicide, illness, the group mentality, where you can sit in a room full of your peers, I suppose, who have the same experience, but just their own journeys. But it's amazing how many people will validate what you felt and still do feel, because, you know, it's the same end game.
And we've said before, haven't we, that how you feel alone when you're going through these traumas, whatever they are, whether that's divorce, whatever it is, you feel you're the only one's ever been through it.
Well, when you did the talk and talk thing, and the guy came over and said, I thought I was the only one who went through this, you know, with your divorce and all of that, you know. So, you know, I've always fought against the group mentality. So when I was getting clean and sober, I didn't use the 12 steps. But I'm wondering now whether that was a mistake, because everyone who's been on here talks about group therapy.
But it's got a bit of a stereotype to it, hasn't it? That I'm Lee, I'm an alcoholic. That thing that you see on the telly has got a real negative slant to it. It?
And I'll be honest, before I went, I was always one, I wouldn't go to a group. What do I go to a group for? I don't need to go to a group. That was kind of my mindset.
They don't understand my situation.
They won't get it.
But do you know why humans do that? Because when you go towards a group mentality, especially for something like suicide, the human brain goes, but that detracts from my pain. If I share it dilutes it. And it's not selfish, that's self-preservation, because you feel you need to hold on to that pain, otherwise the person who has left you is not validated anymore. But then when you see that middle ground, you can understand that, look, I can relate to you, I can see what you're feeling because I'm feeling it. And I suppose that can actually be a celebration of life rather than a loss. Amazing. So what happened? I mean, without giving any of your secrets or whatever, but what happens in these groups? Is it just talking? Is it led?
There are facilitators,
right?
So one of the other founders, or both the other founders of OLLIE, actually facilitate subs groups as well.
Right.
So there's facilitators who have experienced bereavement through suicide.
Right.
So, and then people just literally sit in a circle, like you might imagine. And if you want to talk, you talk. If you don't want to talk, you don't. You can talk about anything you want. It doesn't have to be suicide or what you're there for. And so for the first one, I just kind of listened to see what the crack was, really, see what people are talking about. Made me realise, Christ, the things I've been thinking and the things I might have thought over the last 6 months are pretty bloody normal. Listening to these people, kept going to those groups. They're only monthly, and got to meet Jane and Stuart, the other 2 founders, through the OLLIE Foundation.
Right.
Now, Stuart and I kept in touch because when Stuart came along, his situation was similar to mine. He was a dad who didn't live with his children, but he saw them all the time. So there were some similarities. So we kind of got on, and would just chew the fat and chat, and might talk to each other about, you know, life and children and stuff. But anyway, the 3 of us, after a period of time, decided, when you get into that world of statistics, which are thousands and thousands, and biggest killer of men under 50, you know, in the UK, and all of this, we had to do something. But we weren't sure when we said it what that meant. We just knew you couldn't sit back knowing the devastation it causes and how it literally hollows you out. I was hollowed out, and from the minute you're told the news, that copper first told me, the me that existed ceased to exist.
Yep.
And a new me existed from that moment in time. Right, so, and that's just the way it is. You can't go back.
Okay, let's investigate that a little bit. So, traits that you had, way that you lived, way that you thought, which was different? What were there tangible differences?
Yeah, work stopped being so important instantly.
Yeah.
So what used to be my paid profession meant I travelled around a lot, project managing jobs, basically. And I always used to think, I'm doing this for the family. Because you are kind of, you're doing it for money, to pay for the home and all this kind of stuff. But it meant I was away a lot. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So instantly, so you miss stuff. You miss school birthdays. You might miss school plays. All those kind of things. That stopped instantly. Right. So it was like work. I suddenly realised work is important because we all need money. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm not taking the piss and being silly, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not important. No. So that changed. I became more tolerant of people. I never used to suffer fools gladly. Sometimes I think, fucking get a life. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Right, you do feel that.
Yeah, but then it made me instantly realise, as I would have been on that day my son died and afterwards, you've no idea what someone's going through. No. They might come into work and have a face like a slapped arse, but you've no idea what's going on. Yeah, and just be considerate.
That gets said a lot, doesn't it? You don't know what the be kind movement.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone really grasps it unless you've been through something really bad.
Yeah, I'd agree.
There's a lot of lip service paid, for sure, about that. Yeah. I mean, when you walk into a room, right, and every single person in that room has a different experience of the same day. Yeah. So the only collective thought is the day. Yeah. And if you don't know, and also I've gone into places furious about certain situations, and someone said, well, "What the fuck's the matter with you?" You know, and you think, and then my initial reaction is to go bang. Yeah. So then they get it. So that's great. Well done. Yeah, so, but the fact of the matter is, when you pay lip service to something, are you actually doing it? But because, as Lee says, because you've gone through that, now you're thinking, well, hold on a minute. Is he all right? Yeah. Is she all right? Yeah. Are they doing what they need to do? Yeah. That's great. I mean, there has to be a positive that comes from this. Yeah. Now, the major positive is that you have the type of brain that says to you, I don't want to sit and wallow. Yeah. I need to do something. Yeah. And that's amazing to have that push. Obviously, it comes. You're a project manager. You know, you come and do that. Yeah. So, what was the next step?
Well, we literally kicked the idea around. What we're going to do? We're going to raise some money. What we're going to do with the money? So, Stuart started looking into. There's a particular type of training called ASSIST, which is applied suicide intervention skills training, and it's very intense suicide prevention training. So like a 2-day thing. So we started thinking, right, we want to put on some ASSIST training in Hertfordshire. Right. Tried to find some ASSIST trainers. They're all up in the north. There weren't many around. So we went on this mission to raise money so we could pay people to be trained in ASSIST training, so we could deliver ASSIST training. That was the first step. Yeah. The rest of it then grew from there. The OLLIE Foundation, it grew. Lots of volunteers, people. As you, I guess, is the case with small grassroots charities, people come and go. They can volunteer for a bit and then they can't, and you know, because people have got lives. Yeah. And then it grew. Stuart, myself, and Jane stayed involved, with our own careers, but as trustees and going to speak at events or fundraisers and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And Debbie came on board and some of the other team. And then the breadth of training increased because you start to become aware, actually, there's a need for this. It's all under the umbrella of mental health and well-being, but you realise there's a need for this and a need for that and a need for something else. And, there's a big one now, which Debbie might have spoken to you about, is safer prescribing for antidepressants. Yep. Which is all linked to the whole thing. Antidepressants, great stuff. Lots of people need them. But 1 in 200 people, and they often don't know this, they can cause suicidal thoughts. Now, it does say it in the 50-page booklet you're going to get, but who reads the 50-page booklet?
I didn't.
No, exactly. And they kind of, this sounds flippant, I don't mean it to, they're kind of giving out like Smarties now. Yeah. Probably for the right reasons, to try and help people, but they're not talked through what the potential side effect is. So if it happens to somebody, they go, the meds aren't working, I'll stop taking them. Yeah, which is the worst thing to do. They should be going back to the doctor. So,
I mean, putting it through into personal experience, when you're going through what you're going through. But I phoned the GP and said, look, I've got anxiety. I can't deal with it. It got to the point where you can't get out of bed, and you know, tangible, all that. But then I told the mental health nurse who contacted me, I told her what the treatment should be, where I should go, how I should do it, because my brother Sean, you might have seen his show, he just said, look mate, I've done this, it's helped me, and we're very similar. And so I just told the mental health nurse what I wanted, and then got it. She doesn't know me from Adam.
No.
And also, you know, there's the other thing about being an addict as well. You know, am I doing that for a pill? You know, because I want to take something. You know, but it's interesting that there are no. Everyone says, well, there are fail-safes. There are this. There aren't.
No.
I can phone up and tell a mental health nurse what I needed, because I'm educated. I kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about sometimes, which of course I don't. But you know, it makes us all think about that. But you know, so let's emphasise that 1 in 200 people who take antidepressants are then provided with suicidal thoughts from that medication. Right? Have a listen to that again. 200. One person in every 200 gets suicidal tendencies from antidepressants. That's madness.
Again, which I was oblivious to. You know, oblivious plays a lot.
Do you know what? Oblivious. But oblivious is an amazing word, because until you're drawn to the subject, why would you think about it? Because also you don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh well, one of my friends or one of my children may kill themselves today. That's not, unless of course they're in and out of unless you've got those triggers.
Agreed.
But have you come to terms with TJ's death now?
Well, that's interesting, because you don't actually come to terms with it, right? So, and people will say to me, and they all mean it in the best meaning way, so I don't get offended by anything anybody says, right? Because they just say what they think's best. Some people will say, have you got over it? And I'm like, well, I didn't have a cold. So no, I haven't got over it because I didn't have the measles. You don't really come to terms with it. What I find happens, and grief is grief, right? Whatever you're grieving over, and it's a journey for everybody. So what happens is, it becomes easier to carry the burden. That's what happens. So it's always there. So it's always there, but it just gets easier to carry it.
Do you feel that your work in the field has helped you as well?
Yeah, because, and I understand why not everybody could do what we've done.
No.
Because people are in different places and they deal with grief in a different way. For me, it was important, I used to say this to Stuart and Jane, if starting the OLLIE Foundation saves one life and one family from going through it, then that's worth it.
It's job done,
It's worth it. It has to be worth it, because you know how shit it is. You don't want anybody to go through it or experience it. So if we can make a difference, that's what you have to do.
The other thing about that is, as well, is you might not realise how much of a difference you're making because it's not advertised. You know, people might hear what you're saying, go to a course, or be affected by somebody who's been to that course, and you would never know. And that's the amazing thing, you know, the underlying thing. Help doesn't have to be this big overt signal.
No.
But if the right information is out there, then that's going to help.
Yeah, and a couple of things that have happened which kind of prove exactly what you're saying. So I agree 100%. Somebody heard me talking about, as we are today, talking about it, and the fact that when the police told me I didn't break down into an emotional wreck. Now, somebody heard me talking about that. I don't know who it was, but he spoke to Debbie and said, that really helped me, because he was the same and he thought there was something wrong with him, that he didn't suddenly become this emotional wreck.
Feel sort of guilty that you didn't react badly.
It was really eating him up. That was his reaction. So that helped somebody. And as you said, because people come on the training, they go on the courses, and hopefully they go off and everything's great, and we don't hear anything back, because that's the nature of people attending courses. But in the last 2 months, I've literally had 2 people that I didn't know at separate events approach me and paraphrase, thank you, you saved my daughter's life. Right. So that literally twice in the last 2 months, and you kind of stand there and think, well, that's incredible.
You also think those 2 people who've come to this event, right, that just shows how many people are affected, because how many people wouldn't say that because they didn't know how? That's not a criticism, it's just the fact that some people emotionally aren't able to deal with that. But I mean, one of the reasons why I was so interested in having you and or Debbie's going to come on and explain more about, you know, the fundamentals and the education and the ins and outs later on, which is another show that I really want to do. Debbie's not very well, so she couldn't turn up. But when you are in a situation like this and you have an ability to help these people, right, it could be seen that you're helping people in a selfish way because you need to help people to stop it. But that kind of selfish, that's amazing. The OLLIE Foundation is something that I've looked at because we had Joe on.
Yeah.
Because, you know, paddling paramedic, he'd made a plan, and everything I know about suicide comes from him, and, you know, and other incidences I've had. So what is it going forward? Do you work with the charity full time?
I do now. I sacked off from a job that I'd done for 30 odd years.
Yeah.
To work full time for the charity. So that only started in November.
Okay.
So
how's it going?
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
And this sounds really weird as well because of obviously the subject matter, and it is all about helping people, right? So that's what it is all about. It's not like work, whereas work for 30 odd years felt like work.
Yeah.
And there were the stresses and strains, and oh God, you're working so many hours or so many days. This isn't like that, and my wife has to say, right, enough. Shut your laptop. Come and have a cup of tea. Exactly. Because I'll sit there and I'll think I'll just do this and I'll just do that.
Yeah.
Because you start seeing the influence and effect it has on people, and people coming up and saying what they've said to me a couple of times, it just makes you think, well, it definitely is making a difference. It definitely is.
And also, that feeling that you are helping people is addictive. Yeah. Because imagine, I mean, you know, I'm not lucky enough to be in it, so I don't help anybody. But we see your charity, and there's a lot of charities, and I said this before. There's a lot of charities who seem to be more about status than they are about helping. Yeah. You guys, from the start, when Debbie said, "Oh, we haven't got an office," I'm like, "Bang, yes." Yeah. Because you know, selflessly, you've done this because of your situation with the two others. Yeah. And now you're in this position where you have courses set up, you have help for people, you know, people are approaching you saying you save people's lives. Yeah. You're validated entirely on what you've done, and it is amazing. And I want to say on camera, thank you for what you do, all of your charity. I think, you know, if and when people need you, you know, you're there for them. Yeah. And there are courses, and it is a fantastic situation that you have created.
It's great to help, and I always feel, and I did when the two people approached me, when they thank me, I instantly feel really weird, but awkward. Like you just said, "No, thanks for starting it," because it's not about thanks.
No,
it's about just saving lives and changing people's lives. And that might sound a bit weird, but that's how it is for me. You know,
but also you have to have an understanding and a perception of an outsider, which I am. And my perception of that is, good God. Well, do you know what my perception really is? Fucking hell, I wish I could do something like that. That's my perception. So I have admiration for you, which is you know, is something that drives me to do these shows with these charities. Yeah. I think as we have to end, is there a message or something, you know, from your soul to say to people about suicide if they're thinking about it? Is there something we can say?
What I'd say to people, particularly if they're worried about somebody, don't be like I was. I was oblivious. Before my son died, I might read a story in the paper about somebody's taken their own life and think, "Oh, that's really sad," and then move on to the football pages, and I'd probably be more upset that Liverpool lost than the story I've read about suicide, because it wasn't in my world. It wasn't a factor. Yeah. Now, when I look back at things that there aren't always signs, often there aren't signs, but there can be signs, and there can be invitations to start conversations with people. If I knew then what I know now, there are things that my son said that now I'd think, that doesn't seem quite right. I'd ask him some direct questions. So I'd say to anybody, there's training out there. There's training out there. Look at the OLLIE Foundation website. There's lots of training. There are fully funded places available. So if you know you can get them for free. Get some knowledge, because it might help you help yourself or help somebody else. That's what I kind of implore all the time to people. That's whenever I talk, it's about just get some training, because it might make a difference. And people have gone on and got some training and been able to influence somebody else's life and make a difference to somebody else.
Which the whole premise of 50 and Coping has always been vocalisation and communication. So like this, if you can communicate knowledge that you've learnt through your courses, that will spread far and wide. And as we know, the largest killer of men under 50, as you said, is suicide. There is so much suicide in the world that this training now, so you can recognise the signs, you can see the flags. But the most important thing is, even if your world does not have any experience of anyone in suicidal mode making a plan for suicide, it's valid to have that training, because then you stop being oblivious and you start being proactive. And if all of us have just a little bit of knowledge, more than we have now, most situations can be helped. You're not going to solve everything, but the more knowledge, the more education you have, the better things are for the world. Thank you, Chris, for coming. It means pleasure. A lot. 50 in Coping is always, the message is that if you have a problem and you are aware of where your life's going, then seek help. The OLLIE is a place as well. If you want to find any information about what they do, that's where you go. That'll be in the doobly-doo underneath. We've got to end because we've gone over time. Again, thank you, Chris. See you next time.